I've always thought alfalfa smells really good, and I think the cattle do too. They really like to eat it. It's kind of ironic, some people that are against corporate farms, but then the family farms, like the little guys, are often the ones that get hammered the hardest. And a lot of people that don't really know where their food comes from, they don't really think about it that way. Most of us that are involved in the food supply chain, especially in the beef side, like we care about what we do. Learning things that a lot of people don't have an opportunity to learn, and seeing the way things work, and seeing some of the harsh realities of caring for animals, which is animals get sick and sometimes animals die, and it's about as real as it gets out here. That's just what a lot of people want. It's local, natural beef, just like we say it is. I'm Matt Harrington. I'm the owner of Harrington Cattle Company and Copper Star Beef. We're here at the Copper Star Grow Yard, where we feed cattle, breeding cattle, the genetics, the feed, the nutrition, and the care side of things. All things cattle, we do it here. Calves, they gotta grow. Like, for them to get to the point where they're ready to become beef, they need to grow. We call this a grow yard because that's what we do. We grow cattle here. Out on the range, they do that, but it's a lot less intensive. They kind of go out and gather what they need. But here, it's a lot more intensive, so we give them what they need and use our knowledge of nutrition and other professionals that help us to get them exactly what they need based on their life status, like their age and where they're at in the growth cycle. This is McCoy. Some people call him the boss man around here. So McCoy, maybe you can tell everybody, what do we do first thing in the morning when we get here? What do we check?
The bunks.
And what do? We get on the app and we make some adjustments. The cattle are the ones that tell us when it's time to be fed more or to decrease the amount of feed they're getting. So when we come first thing in the morning, we check the bunks, and if they're just like real slicked off, then we know that they need to be increased just a little bit. The main ingredient in our rations is this oat hay, and it comes from not too far away, just on the other side of the mountain. That's one of our things, is we like to get ingredients that are local and close to home. You can see the actual oats in there, like the seed heads. Those have a lot of nutrient value, and then there's like the leaves. They're long and skinny. And then these stems, actually, they're the least amount of nutrient value, but they provide a lot of fiber, which is good for the diet in the cattle. So that's our main roughage, is what we call it. Like, it's rough, somewhat similar to what they would eat on the range, right? Like when there's grass. This is kind of similar to it, so. Alfalfa is a very nutritious legume, and so we do use it quite a bit. The other thing that alfalfa adds to the ration for us is like palatability or taste. I've always thought alfalfa smells really good, and I think the cattle do too. They really like to eat it, so it's an important part of our ration. So as far as the corn portion of our rations, we use flaked corn, steam flaked corn. So it goes through a steamer and a roller. The main reason for that is it kind of starts the breakdown or the process on the corn. So like, they found through research that the most effective utilization of corn comes when it's steam flaked. So that's why we use it. And fortunately, we can get it pretty close to home, just right on the other side of the mountain, 60, 70 miles away. We get it delivered here by the semi-load weekly. These are dried Distillers grains, or DDGs, and they smell so good. I don't think they taste very good, like to me, but they smell really, it's kind of like vanilla. When you smell vanilla, you're like, oh, I want that. We got to be careful, if it's really windy, it can kind of get blown around, but that's why we add water to our ration at the end, is to try to help bind this kind of ingredient that's pretty light and pretty small, and get it distributed evenly throughout the ration. They're not a big portion of the ration at all. You've probably heard it said that a cow has 4 stomachs, and that's not really true. It's more like 4 compartments, right? So the main big compartment that's like a fermentation vat is called the rumen. And that's where all the action takes place. And so there's actually billions of microorganisms in that rumen, and they're actually the ones that do most of the digestion. And so that's why we try to pay attention to what's in our ration, because what we put in the ration affects those microorganisms. This is mixed in at between 2.5% and 4% of the entire ration as fed is this mineral and vitamin mix. It has things like limestone for calcium and other trace mineral sources. It has a vitamin pack in it to cover our bases as far as the macro and micro mineral needs of the cattle here. So after the mineral, water is the last thing that we add at the end. So as the machines, as the augers spin and the knives chop the stems and mix everything, we have water being added, but we're watching the scale. And so most of our rations have water added at like 7 to 9%. So the Feed Wagon is actually a pretty cool piece of equipment because of how well it mixes everything up. You think we pour dried Distillers grains down in there and corn, like that stuff's just gonna be sitting at the bottom. And yet when you come over here and grab a handful of it, you can see all of the ingredients in any handful of feed at any point in the bunk. So it's pretty incredible. You go down right here, anywhere down there, you see corn, you see DDGs, you see oat hay, you see alfalfa. Everything is there, it's mixed up. It's incredible. These cattle behind me are calves that were pretty fresh weaned, like they've been off their moms maybe a couple weeks, like 2 or 3 weeks. And so they're still kind of adjusting, like their rumen's getting used to the new feed. They're getting used to being here, being away from their moms. They're doing really good. Gestation period for a cow is about 9 months, about the same as a human. That calf is born and needs the nutrients from the mom, you know, the colostrum, the milk, and stays with his mom for a varying amount of time, depending on a lot of factors, but typically 6 to 9 months, that calf will remain with his mom and it will be out on the range, you know, learning how to get around and eat. And they start eating at a pretty young age. Even though they're still getting milk, they start eating at a pretty young age. So it's pretty common for, especially when you get a new group of calves, that 1 or 2 will get out, you know, like during the night or something. But some people might think like, oh, the cattle don't want to be there. They don't like being confined. Like but truly when they get out, they don't choose to run back to the mountains. They literally just turn around and start eating again. So it's kind of interesting. Like cattle are comfortable here. They have space, they have feed, they have water. That's what they want to do. They want to eat and they want to be comfortable. When the calf is separated from its mom and done being with its mom, that's called weaning. That can be a stressful event for the calf. And so there's been a lot of research done about the best way to do it. Those include like fence line weaning, or where the mom is still kind of somewhat close by so that they can't get the milk and they're kind of starting that separation, but at least vocally and visually they're still able to see their mom. But there's different methods that you can do to try to make that as least stressful as possible. At that point, calves usually go to grass or to a wheat field or to a yard like ours, where it's like their next step is like getting adjusted. You know, they're done being with their mom and they're kind of on to the next step. And the best option is to go to grass somewhere else, like either to a wheat field or irrigated pasture or somewhere where they can continue to forage because it's less expensive. When we say natural, at least in our program, it's just the cattle that end up in our beef program, they've never been given added growth hormones or antibiotics. That's just what a lot of people want. And so we feel like we can offer that. That doesn't necessarily mean, like, I don't think antibiotics are bad per se. Like, they have their place when an animal needs them. They need to be treated to thrive, you know, to be healthy, and that needs to happen. And so those cattle are kind of like pulled out of the program and not used anymore, but they get to live, you know. Once they're up to a certain weight, and again, it varies, but just throwing out there like 750, 800 pounds, that's typically when they go into like a feedlot or a finishing yard or somewhere where that's their last stop before they, you know, go to harvest. Cattle that we finish out here or fatten to prepare for harvest, they are grain finished. They do eat corn. They also eat hay and all the other ingredients that we talked about. Grain finished beef has more fat content in it, which a lot of people like that adds the flavor and juiciness kind of in your steak. And typically a grass-fed animal would have less fat, which some people like and some people don't. Some people think it's missing the fat, it's missing the flavor, it's missing the juice. And other people say that's what I want. You know, I don't want so much fat, and you know, that's fine. That's the whole point, is that we want to have, you know, want people to have options if they want. Steers grow faster and usually end up bigger, so they usually bring more money in general just because they grow faster and weigh more. But heifers, sometimes it seems like they even grade a little bit better as far as like the marbling in the meat. McCoy, what's the difference between a heifer and a steer? You remember a steer and a bull? What's the difference between a steer and a bull? As far as classes of cattle, like that's what we kind of refer to it, like when we feed different classes of cattle. So you have cattle, right? Like that's cows plural, right? But not cows, because cows are female, right? So cows are basically adult female cattle. Like they have had a calf, so now they're a cow. Female that has not had a calf that's younger is a heifer. A bull is obviously a male, and then a steer is a bull that has been castrated, so had his testicles removed. And some people might say, like, why do you do that, you know? Well, it makes them a lot easier to manage because they don't have like the testosterone and the drive to go breed cows, and so they cause a lot less problems. It also is better for the beef, for the end product, right? Because it's not so much like bulk muscle. It's oftentimes more tender and more flavorful because like it's putting nutrients towards the end product rather than like into a big bulky neck like that you see a bull have. Cattle have what we call a flight zone. Just like with humans, like if someone comes and gets like right in your bubble, what are you gonna do? You're either gonna like push them away or you're gonna back away, right? Because they're in your bubble. And so cattle that are pretty dang gentle, like that maybe grew up in someone's backyard, their flight zone is like maybe a foot. Like you literally have to get right up on them to get them to move. And cattle that grew up like in the middle of nowhere, like up in the mountains, see humans once a year, their flight zone might be like a quarter mile. So a lot of the frustrations that come with cattle handling are oftentimes tied back to the facilities and can be fixed by changing your facilities. Because sometimes they need to go in, you know, we need to get them out of the pen, need to put them through the chute, they need to be vaccinated, treated, weighed, loaded on a trailer, they need to be handled. These cattle are pretty gentle, so you can see like they're not really running off behind us or anything. If I go over the fence, McCoy, do you want to crawl through there? Okay, go crawl through there and walk towards the heifers and we'll watch them move off the pressure. See how we got closer and some of them are like backing up because they're already starting to feel that pressure from us. Go ahead, McCoy. See, and now as McCoy gets closer, just nice and easy, bud, walk towards them. They're starting to move off of his pressure. But, you know, a minute ago when we were standing out here, they weren't feeling that pressure. They were good with just standing there watching us because they weren't feeling the pressure. I think it's important for humans to remember this too. Like everyone feels pressure. And if you just drive people nuts, pressuring them all the time, like what are they gonna do? They're not gonna act good. They're not gonna respond well to what you want them to do. So give people space, work with them. And that's the same with cattle. Just give them space, understand why they do or don't do what they do, and then work with them accordingly. Good job, McCoy. Perfect. So it is nice to have some good horses around at a grow yard or a feedlot type situation, just because you cover a lot of ground and a lot of times it's not as conducive to like be on a four-wheeler. I mean, we still use like gators and four-wheelers and stuff to get around, but as far as like going into the cattle and like sorting or picking out a one that needs some attention, like because it's sick, or just in general, the cattle seem to respond a little bit better to the presence of a horse. From the time I was just a young kid, you know, I was drawn to the cattle industry, like animal husbandry, basically like caring for cattle. And I grew up on a farm where we grew plants, and that's still like in me, right? Like I'm always still drawn to that, but I just found myself being drawn more to like the animal husbandry. And so we're just gonna get the next group of these heifers that are gonna go in and be worked into the chute. These heifers really are just ideal in my mind as far as like a group of heifers that are like in good condition, good size, good health. They just look really good to me. I think they're gonna respond really well to the protocols and should have a really good success as far as getting them bred and getting them to stay pregnant. It's kind of ironic that you have like some people that really like are against corporate farms and stuff like that. But then the family farms, like the little guys, are often the ones that get hammered the hardest by policies, regulations, you know, the media. And so it's kind of tough. It's kind of like, well, you know, if people want the family farms to stay alive, then we kind of got to create or maintain the environment where they can. And if not, if you're going to try to take them out, then you're going to have to get ready to be okay with corporate farms, because you know, if we're going to wipe out all the little guys, that's what's going to be left. And so I think that a lot of people that don't really know where their food comes from, they don't really think about it that way. They don't think like, wow, we should protect American agriculture, because then we'll have cheaper food, we'll have more access to food, and we'll have more control over our food, which I think everyone wants. Sometimes they just don't understand that that's what they want. There's so much misinformation out there about ag, and I'm not saying that all of ag is like completely innocent or whatever, right? I mean, of course, there's always going to be people that are doing things that they probably shouldn't, but we don't, you know, and most people don't. And that's the point, is that most of us that are involved in the food chain, in the food supply chain, especially in the beef side, like we care about what we do. It's a pretty open book, and what we tell people we provide, that's what we provide. I mean, it's local, natural beef, just like we say it is.